Voila. So again, hello to everyone joining. Thanks for your messages in the chat. Welcome to this information session for Innoweave's Impact and Strategic Clarity stream. My name is Ana Sofia. I'm a program officer, as I mentioned, and I'm joined today by Lynn, who will be introducing herself in a little bit. Lynn is a partner at Social Impact Advisors, which is close collaborator in Innoweave, and she has been a long-standing coach with us. So I'm very grateful, Lynn, that you're facilitating with me today. Here is what we've planned for today's session. So our roadmap for today. First, we'll give a quick overview of Innoweave and give you that information on our approach. Then we'll jump right into the meat of the session, which is really the Impact and Strategic Clarity stream and what it consists of. We'll give some case studies and examples, and then move over to sharing some tips and questions and markers that you can use to assess your coaching readiness if you do feel like this is a good fit for you and your organization. And then speak a bit to what does the user journey for coaching engagement look like in this stream. And I'll share specifically some details on our application process, which has changed recently. So there are some important changes for you to note if you are thinking of applying. Of course, at the end, we'll have some time for discussion. And hi to people joining there. I'll take a quick step back now and start with some background. Innoweave is part of the McConnell Foundation, and McConnell is a private family foundation based in Montreal that works to advance a resilient, sustainable, and inclusive society. Our focus areas at the moment are climate, reconciliation, and communities, or advancing the well-being and resilience of communities. McConnell has worked in the sector for many decades, and that offered the viewpoint to make a few observations about the sector's evolving needs. And this is where Innoweave is first born. So it's really born from this observation, which is on the screen, of how the scale and complexity of the challenges that the community sector is responding to are growing continuously. And with that change and that growth, we need to strengthen our practices collectively and adopt new ways of doing. And always when adopting new ways of doing, some support can be needed or can be helpful. And this is really when we can be of help. In broad strokes, Innoweave helps organizations and collectives sharpen their focus and improve their performance. So we can help you clarify the impact you want to have, learn about and test new ways to conduct your work through different social innovation approaches, and ultimately really adopt and grow your capacity to put these approaches in practice and grow your social and environmental impact. The way we work is in streams. So the platform or the initiative is organized into 10 streams. Each of these focuses on a different tool or approach. Today we're focusing on impact and strategic clarity here at the top. And this is really, I like to call it our foundational stream, or we call it our foundational stream, because INSC, or impact and strategic clarity, helps groups reach clarity and focus around the impact that they're trying to achieve and the activities that will lead them there. And we're really going to dive deep into what this means in this session. So I'll leave that at that for now. However, if you feel like you've already done work related to this, if you already have that level of clarity, you are most welcome to explore the other options here on my screen. So if you want to explore streams or supports in impact measurement, developmental evaluation, policy engagement, or whatever aligns with your needs right now, you can find information about our streams on the site. We host information sessions. All of these are recorded and available, and you can always contact us directly. We also have some sessions coming up where you can join Innoweave staff and ask your questions in advance of our upcoming application rounds. So the links for that will also be shared in our follow-up note. Now, what does coaching support look like in practice? So Innoweave works in a variety of ways, which are detailed here. And in short, we first help organizations explore the different streams and tools that are available on our platform and beyond, and understand what might align or not align with their goals. And we call this the wayfinding stage. And then once organizations have determined that they're interested in pursuing coaching, then we support them in advancing their ideas, their plans, and in getting ready to work with a coach or an expert. And finally, we offer financial resources to help organizations engage coaches that can help them build their capacity to implement the tool that they've chosen. And why do we say coaching? So we use the word coaching very intentionally. And here's an overview of our facilitated coaching model. We use coaching and not consultant because coaching has very particular characteristics that are listed here. So in a coaching model, organizations execute the work and really hold all the ownership for the work. And they have the facilitation by coaches, of course, and the process is supported by customized coaching and is done in coordination, but by coordination with the coach, but it's really held by the organization. And each participating organization crafts its own plan and executes the work. So there's a lot of independent work, and the idea in the coaching is really to increase the skills in the organization to continue this work moving forward after the engagement is done. I've noted here something quite important, which is that for the impact and strategic clarity stream, we do ask that organizations work with a certified impact and strategic clarity coach. You can find the full list on our site. This is slightly different, or this is different than with our other streams. And I'm just looking at the chat. Hi, Will. And you can find a full list for the coaches on our website. If you have questions about this, do let me know. I'll now jump to the meat of the conversation today. So the impact and strategic clarity stream. What is it? What does it consist of, and how might it align with your needs now? So first, what does it consist of? Impact and strategic clarity helps organizations clarify the what, so what they aim to achieve, and the how, or how they will achieve that, and also to consider how they might assess their progress along the way. And why do we place so much emphasis on clarifying your impact? Why focus why focus on this? So as the Cheshire cat says to Alice, if you don't know where you're going, any road can take you there. And not all roads are created equal. So INSC helps organizations to be strategic and to achieve the best fit between their programming, their actions, the resources they have at hand, and the impact that they want to be having in their community and in their work. There are a few reasons why you might be interested in exploring this type of support, and we've listed some here. So this stream might be the right approach if you're seeking to shift from thinking about what do you do to what outcomes you're trying to generate, which is an important distinction, and how you are trying to generate those outcomes. It's helpful if you are looking to establish decision-making benchmarks, including decisions around what you want to be doing and what you might not want to be doing. Both are different decisions and both are, I'd say, equally important. INSC and the clarity reached through the stream can also help you set more specific targets and transparency and accountability internally, support your strategic planning, help you better communicate the impact you're hoping to have and having internally and externally. And in relation to this, build a shared alignment within your organization. The stream has a particular set of deliverables, so they are listed here. When engaging in the stream, the organization and coach work on the following: an intended impact statement, a theory of change, and a set of strategic priorities and action plan to implement that theory of change. We're going to dive into what an intended impact statement is and what a theory of change is in a little bit, but I just wanted to list them here before I pass it over to Lynn, who will be diving into these concepts and into her experience as a coach in the stream. So with that, I'll pass it to you, Lynn, to continue with the next piece.
Great. Thanks, Anna-Sophia. Really excited to be here and share some of this experience so that you can get a flavor of, is this the right thing for you? And we're all good. So two of the things Ansel mentioned recently were around intended impact and theory of change. Intended impact is the piece that grounds all of the work. It's frankly the hardest part to come up with, but that's because it's the most important. It is that beacon, that guiding light. What is it that we as an organization are looking to achieve? The result that we're willing to hold ourselves accountable for. No one else is holding you accountable for a result. This is raising the bar on your organization and putting a stake in the ground, maybe mixing metaphors there with our guiding light and our stake in the ground, but bear with me. We're getting a statement that is, what is the result, measurable outcome that we will hold ourselves accountable for, and to know who it's for and the time frame on it. We'll dive a bit more deeply on that, but it's the guidance for all of this work. And then we use that as the basis for our theory of change, which becomes the master plan of what do we need to do to achieve that? What are the strategies, the high level activities, and the more detailed activities that we must do if we as an organization are going to achieve that intended impact? It is some hard work and important work to be doing. So as we break down this intended impact, here's a slide we would work with directly in our coaching work. We break this impact statement down into three components. What specifically will we achieve? What outcomes will we hold ourselves accountable for? We want to get clear also on for whom we do this work. Is it for folks living with a low income? Is it folks of a certain age, a certain geography? Who specifically are we looking to benefit from our work so that we can be more targeted in our work and more intentional about who we are aiming to serve and the difference we're going to make for those people? We then, to make this more of a goal, we need a time frame around it. So we also put that stake in the ground about when are we going to achieve this. So more explicit than, say, a mission statement. This would align with your mission statement, but this has a clear objective that you will know when you are achieving it or your progress towards achieving it. Really important thing to achieve. We have a couple examples. This happens to be one for Pour Trois Points, P3P. We're looking here at an ultimate impact. So this is often our starting point. It is more like your vision statement. It is like, what is the change we want to see in the world? So in this case, for P3P, we're looking at student athletes from at-risk communities. So we're pretty clear about who. They become healthy, resilient, and engaged adults leading enriched lives. Isn't that the world we want? That's what P3P says. But they say, whoa, that's a big thing. We do want that, but we're not prepared to be held accountable for, in a reasonable time frame, achieving that all student athletes are in that situation. So creating our intended impact statement identifies the chunk towards that, the step that we are willing to take towards that in order to achieve it. With a little technical difficulty, we're going to get there. So our statement then says we've got a date. This is obviously an older statement, but by 2019, P3P will develop and empower 150 to 200 long-term positive youth coaches to effectively teach competence, character, and connection to student athletes in low-income schools in Montreal. We've got our for whom. We know the end beneficiaries are going to be these student athletes in low-income schools, but we're really specific about where we're going to have our impact is actually on having the coaches. The belief being that if we have these coaches, we develop and empower those coaches, they're going to be able to make a difference with these young people. But P3P is going to focus their impact on these coaches, knowing the rest will follow. So I hope that gives a flavor of what an impact statement might look like as we're thinking through this work. All of this is tied to the overall master plan. We're talking about strategy here when we're talking about a theory of change. And I expect no one has too many resources, too much money, we can do everything, we're looking for new things to do because we've got time on our hands. That is not the reality of the nonprofit for-purpose sector, right? So what we're looking for here is getting very clear about what that result is that is so important for our organization to rally around and achieve. That's our intended societal impact as it's labeled here. We have limited resources. So of course we can't do everything. And while that seems like bad news, it forces us to say, what is it most important that we do? Often groups come into this work challenged by too many things to do. We don't know what to say no to. We're chasing money because there's opportunity to get funding and we need funding, but it means we have scope creep and we get into additional things. This is about clarifying what that result is we're really looking to achieve, and therefore in that red line, looking for the tightest fit between what actions we should undertake, best use of our resources, knowing the impact that we intend to achieve. So very powerful work in taking this on, and difficult sort of navel gazing studying around this work. So we've talked a lot about intended impact, getting that clarity about what it is we're going to achieve. We then get to talk about what people kind of come into this wanting to talk about, which is how. All the great programs, the activities, the advocacy work, the actions we're going to take on. We get to how once we have figured out what it is we're going to achieve, and putting that all together builds our theory of change. This theory of change is a powerful tool. By having this, everyone around the table on your team within your organization gets aligned about what it is we're looking to achieve and our master plan for doing it, how we're going to go about doing that and measure our success. It's probably also including stakeholders beyond your team. Board members are often a part of this and certainly would need to be aligned with the work that you're taking on. And often we're involving donors or other key stakeholders, and of course your recipients, that they are giving you feedback about what it is you should be achieving and the best way to go about doing it. So in the end, there's clear alignment and agreement from various stakeholders. We're going to show you some examples of some pictures, really powerful to have a one-page graphic, a visual representation that allows everybody to align and allows you to also externally communicate your story in the work that you're doing. This plan is the start for evaluation. As you're thinking about what to evaluate, you look back at your theory of change and saying, what are the important things that we're doing and the important intended impact that we look to achieve? And that's going to guide what we should therefore be measuring and evaluating. So lots of good reasons to be doing this important work, a very powerful tool. Let's get into some examples of this. So this one is Youth Without Shelter. This is obviously a shelter for youth. It is near the Toronto airport, and they were looking for clarity, alignment. How do we say no to things as part of their work in diving into impact and strategic clarity some years ago. They had a team of both staff and board members who went through this project, and we'll show kind of an overview of the typical process, but they followed that typical process where together we were meeting every 2 weeks. So the coach and the team meet every 2 weeks, and then they also meet on their own on the weeks in between, having these challenging conversations about really, why are we here? What is it we are looking to achieve? What is it we need to do if we're going to achieve that? So they followed a typical process, drafting an impact statement and a theory of change, validating, refining it with their stakeholders and getting great feedback around that, and then developing an action plan to make it happen, and having all the benefits we've been talking about so far as we look through this work. So they came up with a lovely graphic. We'll give you part of the graphic, but here's the important part, that stake in the ground, that beacon. What is the objective of this work? So they have a statement at the top here, the white font, talking about more their vision, the ultimate impact, that they are empowering youth facing homelessness to reach their individual potential. They're not holding themselves accountable for this. This is big. This is what they're pointing towards. What they're holding themselves accountable for is this statement in yellow in the roof. And it says that for the time period they were looking at, a 5-year period, 500 youth who were impacted by this organization will exit out of homelessness to stable living. And they have stable living defined by the people who have lived this experience, the youth who have been at the shelters. They define stable living as having an income, a roof over their heads, a support network, and the opportunity to pursue interests or goals. So this was quite a shift for this organization, that in drafting a theory of change and then getting feedback from various stakeholders, it included looking at hearing from focus groups of youth who had been at their shelter and other places. And they realized that a lot of people were repeat customers. Yes, they left, and YWS felt good about that. They were able to house them in their time of need and then got them into housing, but it didn't last. And so they would end up back in the shelter system, whether it was back at YWS or at another shelter. And so the staff said, you know what, this is not what we want. We want to be more than an emergency shelter, just providing a roof over their heads and serving the needs while they're here. We are going to step up. We are going to be accountable now for them exiting homelessness, not returning to the shelter system, and achieving stable living. So this was a big shift, knowing they would need to address root causes. They had lots of excitement from staff at moving to this, really changing people's lives in a more significant way. Donors were excited about it when they were consulted to give feedback on this work. And so this has set them on a trajectory of saying, right, this is a different objective. It's more people and a greater impact that we are making for these people. What then does that mean we must do? So this is our impact statement. We need to build out the rest of our theory of change. What are the high level strategies and activities we need to take on? And I'm sure this is small. You'll have the deck also in the end, but there's three big strategies they're taking on. One is providing quality wraparound supports for the people at the center. So while youth are there, they might need help with accessing mental health supports, or figuring out how to get back into school, or how to apply for a job, get a job, obviously get housing. So those supports are provided while the youth are there, and that's not that different perhaps than what they were doing before. What really shifted was this middle one in yellow that says we need to actually continue to provide those same wraparound supports after youth leave the center, because that's the way they're going to actually be in stable living. We can't just expect that they've had all these supports while they're with us and then we get them in new housing and they're fine. And so how do we make sure that they still have access to mental health supports if that's what they need, or get help getting back into school, or accessing jobs, or getting food through things like COVID, where times were tough and they needed some additional supports. So it made sense for YWS to now invest in supports outside of the shelter, which wouldn't have made sense in their previous view of what their objective was. If they were just to house the people who came to the shelter, it didn't make sense to have people and resources dedicated to outside the shelter. And now that makes a lot of sense and will really point to success that is good for YWS and good for society with more of this happening. The third one there I will point to is around education and advocacy. So this is their third pillar set of stairs in the house. It is, again, something that they had going on previously, but by doing this work, they identified that there were actually three kinds of clients that they had in really diving into their data and having these focus groups. That there are some clients who just need a short stint, something has happened, there's been a little hiccup in their lives and they need a stopgap, and then they're going to get to housing and be fine, sort of a bridge solution. Then there's a group of chronic homelessness people who have more experience in being homelessness and need more additional supports. And then they identified that there's actually, because they're near the airport, refugees, often this was their first stop to come to them. And so in thinking about all the places that this fairly small organization could advocate, they realized that they really had a unique voice for the refugees who were the youth facing homelessness. And so they're making sure that they're intentional with their advocacy now about focusing where their voice most needs to be heard to align with what they know from their experience.
And
I
there's
do
a
see
great
a question.
yeah,
Yes, I do see
in the
that question
chat.
about strategic plan, and this does say strategic plan. So the two are closely aligned. Having a theory of change is the best thing you can do to be ready for a strategic plan. So people see strategic plans a little bit differently in different organizations. You'll see there's a piece at the bottom here that says mission support. So that's often something that shows up more in a strategic plan. It is the operational pieces. It is the what do we need to do internally to make the magic of this theory of change happen. So we need to amp up our fundraising. We need to get more resourcing around, certain aspects of our org chart need to be bolstered if we're going to make this happen. Maybe we need to hire someone around government relations to support our advocacy work. There can also be timing differences. So sometimes a theory of change might be a longer time horizon. So for example, environmental organizations are often setting goals, perhaps around greenhouse gas reductions, around 2050 or 2030, because those are sort of established stakes in the ground about when we need to see certain reductions happen. And so it might be that the theory of change has a time horizon, say out to 2030, but your strat plan, lots of things are changing. We want a 3-year strat plan that says, what are we going to do towards that bigger objective in the next 3 years, and get more down into the operations of that work. Might involve the budget also. So the two work really well together. And the focus of the impact and strategic clarity is on theory of change. So apologize for the confusion in that this is labeled a strat plan. I would call what we're looking at here with this level of detail as being the theory of change, really hung on the intended impact statement. Okay, I'm going to just flash one more example quickly. And this is looking from a funder standpoint, which is a little bit different. So I will just highlight, there's an impact statement in the center. It's not as measurable. There's not a number in this. So this impact statement says a vibrant network of funders advancing a sustainable Canada. And it's really that as an organization, and when they created this, this was actually the Canadian Environmental Grantmakers Network. They changed their name along the way, which is sometimes what happens as folks dig deeper into really what they're all about. So they determined that they didn't want to be responsible for the environmental outcome that all of the funder members were taking on, which makes sense. They felt that if their network were vibrant and focused, very focused on advancing a sustainable Canada, everything we're doing is about making the country more environmentally and socially sustainable, then we'll be moving things in the right direction. And they have two big strategies about building and sharing skills and knowledge and catalyzing collaboration. Pretty typical of an association, a membership-driven organization. But again, in doing this work, they identified that there was a gap around investments for a sustainable Canada. So this is like impact investing. So instead of these funders putting their money into oil stocks, could they invest in solar panels or wind turbines? And as a result, have their money, which is the bigger pot of money than their granting money, have their money doing lots of great things while also getting a return that would allow for more giving. So this became a new component that this organization took on. So that's the kind of thing that can happen in digging deep into impact and strategic clarity, is really understanding your objective. And as a result, what do we need to be doing or not doing in order to achieve that, that then gets us to that alignment. I'm going to suggest, and so that perhaps we let people know that this video exists. It is on the website and talks about the experience of folks at the Calgary Counseling Center in going through this work. And one of the things it highlights is that this is a big investment of time and energy in order to make it happen, and it's worth it. So we'll encourage you to take a look at that short video. It'll be part of the link that we send out also. Okay, so we'll see if it actually skips or starts playing. It starts playing. So I would like to be able to further skip that. Okay, so just to take this up a notch on the theory of change, the concept of what we're doing is saying, hey, what is it that we're looking to achieve? So we start with our intended impact. We say, hey, if we do these 5 things, A through E, we believe as an organization, it's going to result in these 3 things, X through Z, and that will result in our intended impact. And some of you might think of that as a logic model. I'm fine with that. It is certainly the basis for your theory of change. It is called a theory because we want to test out that theory. We want to be learning as we go, both as we're developing this through this 5 or 6 month process, but also thereafter. And when you're living into your theory of change, right? You've set this 5-year objective. You want to keep coming back to this theory of change to say that was all good in theory, but actually we're identifying some things that say, we have to do this one program or this one strategy a little bit differently. We have to do a lot more of this. We have to actually change out what we were doing in one case with something else. And we might identify, like in the case of YWS, the shelter, that, you know what, for those refugee clients, we need a lot more legal support to help them become landed immigrants. And we need maybe more mental health support for those folks who are chronically homeless, and we need to be prepared for them to stay longer in our shelter than those folks who just have had a hiccup in their life and need a little bridging. So we have a lot better understanding of our clients and the impact of the work that we do, and we adapt as a result so that we can really model out what it is that's going to achieve the impact we look to achieve. An ongoing theory that we continue to revise. I just want to leave you with an overview of this program. So it is a 6 to 8 month program. We aim for about 6. There's often some reason, the summertime is a wonderful time for some downtime. Things come up that delay things a little bit. So 6 to 8 weeks is worth thinking about. We generally meet bi-weekly, every 2 weeks, the coach and team, and you are encouraged to then meet on the opposite weeks, just as a team, again, to build your own capacity to have these tough conversations. We ensure that there is board engagement throughout, whether some board members are part of the team on those regular meetings, or at least there's a regular update every board meeting so that they are aligned. Boards are responsible for the strategy of the organization, and we want to make sure that there's not a surprise that comes 8 months after this when the work is done about some big switch in direction. There's basically 3 phases to this work. We draft that impact statement, the thing you're looking to achieve, and the theory of change. From there, we test it. We hear from other folks about what they think. We get some feedback. We have a number of ways that we might research that. Then we refine the work based on that. And then we say, this is our plan. This is the best theory we've got at this time. Now, how do we make it happen? We build an action plan around that. We've got some rough timelines there for each of them. And you can see that in the first one, we have a kickoff meeting, we're giving an overview of the program, and we're really diving right in out of the gate and drafting and refining intended impact and theory of change. And we introduce change management in this piece also, because we find at the end, perhaps what you're doing is really going to be a significant change, right? So in the case of the Environment Funders of Canada, they were going into impact investing. Well, that's new. That's something we're going to have to introduce. Chances are there's going to be change, and we're going to want to think about how to manage that change successfully. In this middle phase, when we are identifying questions for our theory of change, what are we not sure about in the draft that we've got? We're then going to do some testing in a few ways. And one is perhaps looking at our own program data. So as YWS did in understanding that people were repeat customers, we might get some external research, which is looking at what have other places done successfully to address our impact. And then we might also look at landscape analysis that says, who else is out there? What are other players doing in this space? Maybe there's parts of our programming that we shouldn't do because they're doing it so well, we should just refer people over there, or vice versa. So those are the kinds of things we look at. And often it comes down to coffee chats, having conversations with people who are in the know, they're experts about our topic, or they're somehow a stakeholder, and they're going to influence our theory of change, give us some excellent feedback. Our last phase then is taking that feedback, as I've said, we're refining it, we're planning for the change management piece, developing an action plan, developing a learning agenda. There will always be more questions. This theory, we want to keep testing it out. So what additional questions do we want to keep learning? What additional data should we gather? And then it all wraps up giving some feedback to the coach and to Innoweave so we can continue to improve this program. So that's a quick flight through the stream that I'm going to hand it back to Anso to take it from there. For sure, open to questions.
Yes, thank you, Lynn, so much for that overview. Just reiterating that if you have any questions, please do add them in the chat and we can respond to them right away or at the end. But that was such a good overview of the stream and lovely examples and the details from your experience there. I will now pass on or move on rather to the next piece of our chat today, which is sharing with you some tips and tricks to assess your coaching readiness. So if what Lynn is talking about and what I shared earlier is resonating with where you are at this time and you're considering applying, how can you prepare for that process? So I'm sharing more details about these 5 items. If you go on the Innoweave website, specifically to the INSC web page, you'll find a self-assessment tool that you can use to fill out and take your time to answer questions and get some customized responses and recommendations. So I really do encourage you to take a look at that after this presentation. I'll move through these 5. So first is the focus. What kinds of decisions about the future are you hoping to gain clarity on through this process? This is really a process that can help you make strategic decisions about the future, about how to restructure your priorities if needed. Lynn mentioned some great examples about some significant shifts and some big decisions for what to do or what not to do. You might have a sense of those questions and where you're at right now. And when considering this stream and coaching in this stream, a recommendation is to try to think about how to turn that broad sense of where you're at into specific questions that you would like to answer through this process. That's the first piece. Second, and equally, if not more importantly, is organizational capacity. The question to ask yourself there is, what is your management team's capacity to participate in a process like this one? Lynn shared the steps and the time required. This is a time-intensive process and it does require teams to commit time on a weekly basis. Often this looks like a couple of hours per team member per week. So we do ask you to ask yourself if this is realistic at this time, or if maybe it's worth waiting a little bit and adapting, shifting your priorities in order to participate in a process like this. We don't want this process to be stressing anyone out more than it needs to. And then I'll stress here that participation of leadership in the process is key. So as Lynn mentioned, oftentimes there'll be board members participating on the team, EDs, members of the leadership team, and this is quite important for this. Secondly, on the note of organizational capacity is the amounts, some details on how much the stream costs. So the total cost of the stream is $16,000 plus taxes. And this includes everything that Lynn mentioned. So bi-weekly coaching sessions, working sessions, support, etc. Innoweave can cover up to $12,500 of this total amount. And then we do ask, or organizations are expected to cover that remaining amount, so $3,500. And this is a way for groups. Well, groups have to invest in this process. However, there is a star on this slide. So if this is a barrier to you applying, you can definitely reach out to Innoweave directly, and we can have a discussion around that and discuss what alternatives there might be. There is also the potential for additional expenses if you want to up the support and work on additional deliverables. That is to be discussed with your coach and with Innoweave, who we can share more depending on what your situation is. If you have a specific question, or if this is raising any questions for you, do reach out or just share your question in the chat. With that, I'll move on to the next item, which is motivation. So what's your main motivation for developing an intended impact statement and for refining your theory of change or creating a theory of change? Here we ask you to consider what's your motivation as a team, and is there an alignment around this motivation and a shared commitment to the process? This is quite important when embarking on this work. Fourth is the implementation. Here the question is there flexibility, or how much flexibility does your team and organization have in order to change activities or programs based on the findings of this process? So if something major comes out of this process, will you have that flexibility and leeway to make changes? Or maybe the funding parameters or the systems and decision-making processes that you have in place at the moment might not be adaptable to that, or you might need to think of ways to adapt. So it's important to ask that in your organization, discuss that with leadership, with your board, etc. And then fifth is the timeliness. So this can be a transformational process, and at the same time, it's not necessarily a process that is applicable to all situations at all times. And here, that's why we ask this question. So has your organization recently experienced, or do you anticipate periods of major change or instability that could impact your ability to focus on the process and on the coaching? So we've listed some examples here. It can include financial difficulty. Maybe you have a new ED coming in who ideally would be present in a process like this. Maybe there's a major shift in your programs or activities and some uncertainty around that. Of course, some uncertainty, we're all living through uncertainty, and we know that there's uncertainty all the time, but we do ask you to consider if the timing is right. And again, you can reach out directly to discuss this if you have any questions. I'll now move to a last segment of the presentation. Happy to take questions if there are any, but I'll take you through the user journey and the application process for impact and strategic clarity, which looks like the following. So here you have what the Innoweave user journey looks like generally. This is now standardized across our streams. And the reason why it's standardized is because, and I see Lynn and Ryan laughing, is because INSC is now on a 2-step application process as of the upcoming April 15th deadline. I'm going to speak specifically to these 2 stages. But here you see the whole timeline from the moment where you first engage with us. So that could be today, or maybe you have partnered with us in the past, or you've attended other information sessions. And then all the way to the right here in the project wrap-up. So organizations who have gone through the whole coaching journey and wrap up the project. I'm going to focus specifically on the first 4. And you also have the slides for the last 3. Just think it's more relevant at this stage to focus on the beginning of the journey. So quickly, for the engage and inform step, you're here today, you're hearing this presentation, you might have accessed information on the website. There is a lot more on there, and we have other sessions coming up. So as I mentioned, in advance of April 15, FAQ sessions with our team. You can reach out to INSC coaches who are listed on the website if you have questions as well. And there are other resources on the website and in the sector about these concepts. Next, if you do feel like this is a fit for where you are right now, then we welcome you registering on our online portal, which is here on the site. And this is really the place where organizations submit all of their requests, view their status, and this is an important place of exchange between Innoweave and applicants. Once you've registered, organizations submit an expression of interest through the portal. Right now, if you go to our website on our Apply for Support page, you'll have access to the portal and to the INSC application questions. We are launching the portal in upcoming weeks, and we have details there around how to register, and we'll make sure to contact all interested applicants when we open the portal, and that's coming up shortly. you will, if you do decide to apply, you'll fill out the questionnaire on our portal, submit this, and then, or rather, first I'll stress that the deadline is coming up on April 15th. After that, what happens is Innoweave reviews these requests, these expressions of interest, and then invites some applicants to apply to a request for support. At this stage, so in between the expression of interest and the request for support, we ask that organizations contact coaches. So this actually becomes a requirement of that second step of the application. And this is important because coaches can help you tease out your level of readiness, and you also need to assess if there's availability and alignment on timelines, mutual fit, etc. Again, Innoweave staff are here for support throughout the application process, and the deadline for that would be in June. On June 1st, we would let applicants know after the first stage, of course. Then I will skip over the following slides, but if you're interested in learning more about the process, you can take a look at these. So there's a project kickoff, then you would go on to implementing everything that Lynn described earlier on in that fantastic timeline, and then wrapping up the project. And that is it for the user journey. I've also included here a slide on Innoweave's learning-based approach, which I encourage you to take a look at. We'll be sharing these slides, but it's really focusing or highlighting that our perspective on evaluation at Innoweave is really going beyond the reporting needs or the perceived reporting needs of a funder and toward learning and toward building a process that is focused on sharing learnings, reflecting in a way that's helpful for where you are and where you're going. I encourage you to take a look at that. We have other resources on the website as well. And just to wrap this up and move to our discussion and Q&A section, I'm listing here the funding round deadlines. Innoweave has 3 rounds per year. The deadlines are always the same. So easy: April, June, August, October, December, February. The next round is in April. If you're not ready to apply yet, you can come back in August or December or whenever that might be. If you're looking for resources, there are some on the website. I've listed some helpful ones here. So you see there the case studies that we mentioned and others. And it includes some notes from the Impact and Strategic Clarity Coach community. So if you're curious to hear what type of work they're doing and the reflections from all of their experience with many groups, do take a look. And finally, we can wrap this up and move to the discussion and Q&A section. But I do want to thank you all for your time in joining us today, and also thank you, Lynn, for joining us and for sharing all of your wealth of wisdom about this stream. We really appreciate that. I've dropped my email here if you want to reach me after the session and have specific questions, but if you have some right now, I'm happy to discuss them. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And the recording.